to Peer, the Unblocked chat show, where we discuss the businesses and technologies that are shaping the enterprises of the future. I'm delighted to have Areiel Wolanow here with us today, who's a blockchain expert, has worked on multiple blockchain and distributed ledger projects and big technology projects all around the world in the past. And he's going to be talking to us specifically about blue carbon and seaweed and why we should care about seaweed and what impact it might have on the planet. But before we do that, just wanted to first of all say hello and welcome to Areiel, and tell us a little bit about, first of all, how you got interested in blockchain and your career in blockchain to date.
Hi, Helen. How are you? It's good to see you again. My journey, I suppose I first became aware of blockchain in 2011. Like many people, I read the now famous Gawker article on the Silk Road, and of course ran home to install Tor and sought to see if it was really true that that there was this market for drugs and assassinations and all sorts of unlawful stuff. But I didn't do anything with it until 2014, when I received an opportunity. This was when I was living and working in Nairobi, running IBM's financial services practice for East Africa. And I received an opportunity from the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange to put forward a solution for the provenance of fair trade coffee. Ethiopia had a serious problem, which was that the Fair Trade Organization was threatening to have a blanket ban on all fair trade coffee from Ethiopia because despite the fact that only 2 or 3 small farms had been through the audit process, in the certification process, about 80% of the coffee coming out of Ethiopia was labeled as fair trade. And the Fair Trade Organization had gotten tired of asking nicely. At this point in time, the only blockchain that IBM had running was on a set of nodes on 6 laptops that were sitting in the cafeteria of the R&D lab in Atlanta, Georgia. But nevertheless, it looked very promising, and I went out to look at them and put forward the solution. The client loved it. Unfortunately, the Ethiopian government had said that to do this project, we would have to establish a legal presence in Ethiopia. IBM has offices in about 170 countries, but Ethiopia wasn't one of them. And our lawyers estimated that it would have cost 10 million to establish that presence, and the project was only worth 8. So we were not allowed to go forward. But I think it's fair to say that I had caught in the bug and was hooked at that point. And my very next role in IBM was starting the blockchain services practice for the ASEAN region. And in that role, I sold and delivered IBM's very first blockchain consulting project, which was a letter of credit origination for HSBC and Bank of America out of their Singapore Operations Center.
I mean, it's an interesting journey, because I remember when I worked in think tanks, we had a lot of argument about kind of free trade versus fair trade, because, some sort of purists were arguing, well, free trade is fair trade and we don't need this kind of process. But clearly there was a kind of a problem in the market, which was that the producers weren't necessarily able to bargain for a fair price or to be treated fairly because of where they're coming from in the world or the circumstances they've grown up in. So I think, we're going to come on to this in a minute when we talk about seaweed, but blockchain provides a really interesting opportunity for us to understand more about where food is coming from, what the producers of that food actually get as a benefit and what benefit we get, and how we can kind of try and maybe make that a bit more equitable. So I'd love to hear all about the project that you're working on now, which is to do with tracking seaweed provenance, and just tell us a little bit about why that's so important. Because I think for most people, seaweed, it's sort of the slimy stuff at the beach, or it's just something that you might eat occasionally if you have some sushi, but people don't really realize that there's such an important role that seaweed has to play in the world.
Yeah, no, seaweed actually is a huge part of the value chain for many foods and most cosmetics, in fact. Cosmetic firms are some of the major buyers of seaweed. There, of course, is the more artisanal seaweed that ends up in sushi. One of the new promising developments is that there's some early science that indicates that seaweed can have a major role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions from livestock. That there are several strains of seaweed. It appears, studies indicate that if you add these strains of seaweed to animal feed, you can have drastic reduction in the amount of greenhouse gas emitted by livestock animals. So it plays a key role in the blue carbon market. The last thing is that it's also a key social vector. Seaweed farmers, in many parts of the world, particularly in Indonesia, where this project is focused, are some of the most impoverished and least enabled, least access to education that you could reach.
Yeah, and I was really interested when I started reading about this, because honestly, I didn't really know that much about seaweed myself. And I thought, well, how interesting can seaweed be? But suddenly you're getting into obviously climate change, which is the huge topic of our times, but also into women's equality, some of the safety issues surrounding what happens when climate change means the sea makes it more difficult for us to actually farm seaweed. We have to go further out, and that could be dangerous for people who don't know how to swim. And all kinds of interesting things, and obviously the commodity markets, the different applications we can use seaweed for in medicine and so on as well. So I guess I'm interested in what's different about this project compared to others, because I know there's been previous attempts to track seaweed provenance which haven't necessarily succeeded. So what's different about the SeaGreen project? What are you doing that's different other than
it's a great question, and you're right, there have been a number of attempts to look at the provenance of seaweed and to implement both blockchain and non-blockchain track and trace solutions in the past, and they haven't succeeded. And the reason why is that there was no distribution of the benefits from doing so. So if you asked, if you asked farmers to track the water temperature in which seaweed is grown, or the level of grit, or the level of dryness in the seaweed as it's being dried, all of these factors are a major determinant in the downstream value of the seaweed. But the farmers got none of the benefit from increasing that value. You ask them to do a lot of extra data tracking tasks without really either explaining why they were important or giving them any benefit from the extra time and investment that they would have in doing that. What we did with SeaGreen from the start was to design a solution where everyone in the value chain would realize the benefit: the farmers, the intermediaries, and of course the large downstream buyers. And you do that by enabling not only the track and trace, but the actual payment. So in our model, the intermediary would accept the seaweed from the farmer on consignment, and the farmer would actually get some of the money up front, which doesn't happen now. And the money they would get downstream would be dependent on how much the intermediary was able to sell the seaweed downstream. So all of a sudden, the factors which before really didn't matter to the farmer because he saw none of the gain from it, start to make a difference. So if the farmer can understand that having less humidity in the dried bales, or having a lower grit count, or harvesting at a certain temperature, or any number of factors can actually impact the value they get, then that fundamentally changes the game. The other thing is that the market for seaweed right now for the farmers is a very casual and informal one, in which intermediaries can pick up seaweed with a promise to pay in the future, which sometimes does not get fulfilled, but certainly never gives the farmer the chance to be exposed to some of the upside gains from higher quality seaweed. So by making that process transparent, we help the farmer. We also help the intermediary, though, because when the intermediary concludes the downstream sale, he does not have to physically go back to the farmer to distribute the funds. That happens automatically, and is tracked as part of in the ledger itself. So it becomes actually reduces the cost of operation for the intermediary. So it really does help everybody in the chain.
I think those are two really key points. I mean, the incentives, especially, at the beginning of the process for the farmer to actually get involved, and in a way, it's an education process and an incentive process. So they kind of go hand in hand. And then also, obviously, smart contracts and so on, being able to automate payments, which is one of the key benefits of using blockchains and distributed ledgers. So we'd love to sort of see how it works, because I know the very first time I saw you give a talk. We talked a lot about visualization and how it's really important to actually show rather than tell about projects, because it's much easier for people to understand. So if you're able to do a very quick demo for us, just to show us a little bit about
that. Yeah. One of the things I'm most pleased about this project is that it exists. We launched the prototype in January. So what you're seeing is a working app, and I will share the screen and I will show it to you. All right, so you should be able to see the app on the screen now.
Yep.
So this app is running currently on an iPhone 12. You're seeing a mirror of it on my browser. And now you've lost the mirror. Hang on a second. Okay, there we go. Right, so to start with, let's have a look. So suppose I am farmer. Here are the batches of seaweed in my app. I'm currently looking after 2. Let's take a look at one of them. So the seaweed, first of all, is geolocated. We use Web3 words for that. And it is in a status you can see of graded. Now, the first thing that this does is allows not only myself, but anybody who's thinking of buying this seaweed to see the full provenance and history. So I can go back through all the states back to a seedling. Say, okay, so the seedling was hatched here. It was prepared in ropes, usually, planted in the water. Okay, and I can see what the type is, what cultivation, what the light intensity, the water temperature. So all the attributes that are relative to each state are tracked. So water temperature has a huge impact on seaweed quality. So if I'm Cargill or Estee Lauder, I can actually look and see what temperature was this seaweed grown at. Then it's grown, then it's harvested. Now you can see it's moved back on shore to a drying rack, and it's been dried and graded. So that's it allows me to track, and most of this tracking is automated. I can set a reference price for the seaweed, which somebody would pay to buy it, and I can move it to the next state from graded to baled. So I'm going to bale it. And now you can see that it's baled. Just quickly paging over to, okay, you can see here, seaweed state graded, dried. So you could, all of the, it's all recorded on a quarter ledger.
Very deep level of information there for purchasers. And yes. How does the farmer themselves kind of interact with that? Because if you've got farmers that maybe not too technically literate or sure. financially literate, how do they sort of engage with the system?
Well, there's actually several sort of layers to that question. I think the one question is how do they physically engage with the solution? But there's also a question about education and financial literacy, which you raised, which is equally important. So let me try to answer both of those questions. The method of physical engagement is all mobile based. Somebody may not be financially literate or have even a high school education, but the one thing they're almost certain to have is a phone. Mobile phone penetration in Indonesia, there's about 1.5 SIMs per person in a country of 280 million people. So it's there's quite a few phones there, and even at the lowest levels of poverty, people mostly have them and know how to use them. So a mobile app is very much the way to do it. The physical interaction with the seaweed for the prototype is based on these physical tags. I'll show you one here. They're printed on bamboo because it's sustainable and biodegradable. And now I'm getting ads on my phone. Right. We'll have Pizza Hut after, I think. So this is a QR code here, and there's a serial number here. And interacting with the tags is very simple. You just you just scan it with the app. So this is a piece of seaweed belonging to somebody else. Okay, so here is another piece of seaweed that I could potentially buy. Again, I can scroll through, I could see the entire provenance and history, and I can make an offer. Okay, so I can actually, offer 5. Okay. Take another one and have an example. So there I paid the full price. On this one, you can also choose to buy it on, let's see. Oh, I own this one. I want to pick one that I don't own. Stick. I can make an offer. I can also have an advance and balance. I can do a zero price transfer. So zero price transfer is important because another key element here is that the hatchlings or the seedlings are probably going to be grown by community-owned organizations that are quite common in Indonesia. So these organizations are actually owned by the farmers themselves. Whether it's a co-op, whether it's a community organization, a trade group, et cetera, can grow these seedlings in a more economically feasible way and then share them out with their members. So this is, all of this is, this is not a click-through prototype. All of this exists. The payment is happening over Stripe or Zendit, which is a local derivative. The application is bilingual, so that it's available in Bahasa. But that actually raises another point, which is this is more than just an e-commerce platform. To understand and get the value out of this, the farmers have to understand why this matters. So there's a key element of education. So what we will be doing is we will be linking to a training program that the farmers can access directly via the app. Right now, this is not yet enabled in the prototype, but it'll be linked right there from the home screen. And we're using a training delivery app called Tutorum, which is another UK startup, which does AI-based assessment of literacy levels and targets the right content based on what an individual already knows and doesn't know, to deliver not only the functional capability of being able to sell, but the training so that you understand what it means to sell, why certain quality attributes matter, and how to get the most value out of the time and labor that you're putting in to grow the seaweed.
And then you've got the marketplace obviously as well, which is presumably for the people that want to buy, who can look at the different providers.
So so for instance, here is the marketplace. We've only got a few batches in here now, of course, for the prototype, but yeah, this is where somebody could go and just pick up, buy it, and and thereby and buy it directly. Now, Ewan, who is listening, has accepted the offer, so we can go now and make payment for it. So I'm going to use Stripe, and I'm just going to put in card details. Oh, I didn't put it in. Going a little incomplete. Try again.
And this is all built on which blockchain platform?
This is built on Corda, and the payment uses the platform we're using right now is Stripe.
So people using it don't need to have any interaction with cryptocurrency. It's just purely the blockchain platform is there for an enterprise application. No,
that's correct. And we specifically chose a DLT platform that was not crypto enabled, specifically so that there was no tie into cryptocurrency, because it's really not needed for this use case at all. So this is all done. All the transactions are denominated in fiat currency. So it's very straightforward, and it's using currency that people understand.
Well, it's great to see it. And then maybe we'll just take off the screen share now just for the video so that we have you back on the full screen. So I'm interested in, obviously from the perspective of female equality, you mentioned that a lot of the groups, not necessarily all female, but there's a high proportion of female farmers or maybe other minority groups. So what's the impact for them? Obviously, I mean, getting paid faster is the biggest one probably.
Well, it's getting paid faster, it's getting paid reliably. It's being able to harness the value of the community organizations so that many of the things that require economies of scale to do efficiently can be done, for instance, like managing the hatchlings or the seedlings. So there's that aspect of it. But I think just as important is the educational aspect. To give an example, there was a fabulous BBC documentary about 10 years ago where they went into Ghana and met with some chocolate farmers and or some cocoa farmers and gave them the first taste of chocolate they'd ever had, because none of them actually understood how their product was being used. It was, needless to say, it was an eye-opener that they never had the connection that a chocolate bar actually came from the chocolate, the cocoa that they were harvesting. The training aspect of can't be overstated in terms of how important that is in terms of empowering people to not only understand how their products are being used, but to actually benefit from the improvements in quality.
Yeah, and I think that's true for all of us. I mean, obviously, it seems really shocking that you're producing chocolate products, but you've never tasted chocolate, and really sad as well, because chocolate should be enjoyed by everybody. But we all use products every day that we don't really think about where they come from. I mean, I probably have never noticed that there's seaweed in my face cream that I was using this very morning, or all of kind of foods that we eat, because they are part of such a complex supply chain globally. We just get divorced from the reality of where they're coming from, I think. And I think understanding more about that is obviously becoming a big consumer trend. People do care more now about the ethics of how things are produced, where they come from, their climate impact, and so on. So, that's another huge benefit of what you're doing, as far as I can see, as well as all of the local benefits on the ground for the people in Indonesia. So really excited to hear how it goes along. I also want to hear a bit more about what else you're doing in blockchain. I know you've contributed to lots of policy discussions and debates on blockchain as well. I think we were both at the first meeting of the all-party parliamentary group on blockchain a few years back, which is obviously still going along. What do you think has been the impact of the last year or so on the kind of blockchain industry? I mean, obviously we've had kind of a huge crypto boom, but it's also been very tough for startups during COVID. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on the state of the blockchain industry at the moment.
Well, so I think, my understanding of the crypto boom is perhaps different from other enthusiasts. I see a clique of people who are looking at DLT primarily as a way of raising money, and they tend to flock from one fad to the next, from ICOs to SCRs to SPACs to DeFi. And so forth. So that they will continue chasing, whatever the acronym du jour is, in hopes of raising easy money, and some of them will succeed. But in terms of enterprise blockchain, which is more the area that I focus on, and actually leveraging the capabilities of DLT to fundamentally change the way commerce happens. I don't know if you've seen any of my talks on the history, but this is trying to solve a problem that goes back some 12,000 years, which is to have an independently verifiable record of a commitment between two parties. In terms of realizing that potential, I think that the pandemic has had, in some ways, both a positive and a negative impact. The negative impact that it is certainly, there's no question, it's dried out the amount of investment in enterprise DLT being made for mature solutions. On the other hand, largely by virtue of having not anything better to do, it has caused an explosion of the number of people in their garages working on early stage solutions, some of which are pretty amazing. I mean, I'm frequently called on to do due diligence on early stage DLT prototypes. And some of the things I'm seeing, quite frankly, are knocking my socks off. Not all of them will make it out of that early stage, but the ones that do, I think, are very well positioned. So we're seeing a lot of very early stage development and thinking about solutions. And I'm very excited about some of the things I'm seeing.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think it is obviously sad to see some startups that could have done well, go to the wall, and that's the nature of startups, but it is worse when something's taken out of your hands by a global situation that none of us could have foreseen. But also the amount of kind of pivoting and entrepreneurial spirit and creativity we've seen from all kinds of people. Obviously we've seen people outside of blockchain in the restaurant business, in the events business, in all other industries, kind of creating new types of ideas to keep their skills and alive and find new sources of income. And I think blockchain is no different to that. And actually the fact we've all realized that centralized systems and non-digital systems don't really work in a global pandemic has been a huge boost, because we have to do everything online, whether we want to or not, whether we think we're not techie people or we're too old to learn new things, or everyone's had to change that mentality from the NHS through to education through to commerce, so it's great to see that. And I'm sure it's going to be long-term a boost for the industry in terms of people realizing that we do need more decentralized solutions to a lot of the problems that we have in the world today, commercial and social problems that we have, which is kind of where my passion lies. So I'm really happy to hear more about this project. And I just wanted to end by asking something I asked to everybody, which is, what's been inspiring you during this period? Because it's sometimes hard to keep going in this kind of stressful time that we've had. So have you had new inspiration over the last year in terms of your professional goals or your personal inspirations?
Well, it's actually, somewhat counterintuitively, the pandemic's enabled me to get a lot more work done. So I've probably accomplished more in terms of actual, getting stuff built with my team than I would have on a normal year, because we're not traveling as much. The big change that I hope will stay as a result of the pandemic is something that I see as quite fundamental, and I hope it doesn't go away, which is a change in the level of business intimacy. When you went to a business meeting prior to the pandemic, typically you would suit up. It would be in a conference room, and the whole thing would be stage managed. Certainly, when I was hosting a meeting, I wanted to make sure that the environment was comfortable, that the people were at ease, that I was well turned out. Now we are seeing, we are having conferences with people wearing gym clothes, with their kids crawling all over them, getting up to go answer the door to pick up parcels. And it is really, to my mind, has a hugely positive effect in terms of reminding us of each other's humanity. It is not stage managed. We are dealing with people in real life. And it creates, as I say, I think a little intimacy and oddly enough, given that we're so disconnected, a bonding that I hadn't seen before. So, a lot of us really are parents with school-age children.
I think especially for women, it's made a huge difference, because many of us work from home. I mean, I've been working from home for a long time before the pandemic, and there's a level of fakery involved in these situations. And I think getting rid of some of that fakery and, work and life are blended together once you have children, especially. And, being able to be more honest about that and also more kind to each other, because we all realize that everyone's going through difficult things. I think that's a really important thing for business. Business doesn't have to be something separate that's very formal. It's just part of life. We're all working and trying to do our best work whilst being real people.
Yeah, no, and like I said, that's something that I hope lasts. That level of awareness that we're all, human beings with lives, I think could have a very positive impact on business in general.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to be hopefully near a beach next week now that we're allowed to travel. So I'm going to be getting up close and personal with some real seaweed. And I'll be thinking about it more deeply now that I know how important it is to the world. So thank you very much, Areiel, for being here today. We're going to be putting the recording of this up on YouTube as well for anyone who missed it. So if you want to share it, or if you're listening in and people who'd like to listen in, then I'll be sharing the link in LinkedIn and all the other places after this. But thanks again to Areiel for being here and telling us more about SeaGreen. It was a great pleasure.
You're very welcome, Helen. It was a pleasure to be here, and take care, and let me know how the beach trip goes.
I will. Bye for now.
Take care.